Hey YouTubers, this is Charlie. So Batman Arkham Knight is coming out this month. So I wanted to do a video for like my favorite different Batman comics, just based on different artists over the years. Throughout the decades, Batman has changed quite a bit, from like the Bob Kane era through Jim Lee and now like present day. Typically when new artists are brought on or new writers, there's a big shift in the tone of the character. Right now, DC is getting ready to do that again. The version we meet in Arkham Knight is all action-based. I mean, it just lends itself to video games. Comic books, a lot more complex, a little more story-based. I do think eventually, though, like comic books and video games will merge into like a singular format. They'll be, comic books will just become much more interactive. Let's all just hold our breaths for choose-your-own-adventure virtual reality Batman stories. So going all the way back to the beginning, we got to start with Bob Kane. Most of the early Batman stories took cues from The Shadow, Doc Savage, Zorro, Dick Tracy, the Phantom, all of the really famous pulp characters. The early artists for this period were Dick Sprang and Jerry Robinson. Up until the point they introduced Robin to the comics, you saw a lot of monsters, a lot of really dark gangster stories. Once Robin came along though, it turned into lighter fantasy. A really fun story to check out from this era is Batman #1, like the official first one, The Joker Returns. Remember, Batman originally debuted in Detective Comics, not in his own title. If you want another deep cut, check out Detective Comics number 38. That's the Robin the Boy Wonder. That was just the era when, most of the Batman characters that you know about today, most of the biggest characters all debuted, under the watchful eye of Bob Kane. There's a lot of theories that he technically did not create the Batman character too, or even the Joker. I mean, it's a big controversy. His writer at the time, Bill Finger, asserted that he was the one that came up with the idea for the Joker based on this Coney Island ride, and that he also influenced the look of the original Batman character. Last year, whenever they had like the Batman 75th anniversary, there was a whole bunch of interviews about, like the supposed true origin of the Batman character. Moving into the 1950s, Batman shifted into more, sci-fi territory just because people felt like the crime drama was displayed in such a light way that people were starting to emulate it, like little kids were starting to mimic the Joker. So just to sidestep crazy lawsuits, he started moving into more sci-fi territory. And people also started to complain that the character was promoting homosexuality, so they introduced Batgirl. That was kind of the beginning of the Bat family too, but I just think it's funny that was a reaction to people saying that Batman promoted homosexuality. Some deep cuts to check out from this era are Detective Comics number 233, that's the Batwoman, obviously the arrival of Batgirl. And a good example of like a really sci-fi Batman story is Batman, the Superman of Planet X. That's Batman number 113. Like I said, 1950s science fiction stories. Moving into the 1960s, Batman comics had started to sell really poorly, like as tends to happen from decade to decade. They hit like a big lull, so they got way, way darker. This is in stark contrast to the tone of the TV show, the original Adam West TV show that debuted in 1966. So as much as people complain that the TV shows don't reflect the comic books right now, the same was true back in the 1960s. Like here in Batman number 156, he hallucinates Robin's death on an alternate planet. Would not be the last time that he had to watch a Robin die. Over the years, Batman's made it really clear that he is not afraid to break every single bone in his body to catch criminals, but if you really want to hurt him, you kill his sidekick. Later in the 1960s, like a couple years after that, they debuted like the New Look era, where Bob Kane didn't have like draconian rule over the look and feel of Batman. Carmine Infantino came in and took the character down an even darker route. This is where we're starting to get into like really dark crime drama, but not quite as dark as Frank Miller 80s era. Some really good books from that era to read are Fright of the Scarecrow from Batman number 189, The Outsider Saga, which is Detective Comics 328 all the way through 356. And if you want a really good Poison Ivy story, there's Beware of Poison Ivy, giant exclamation point. That's Batman number 181. Then we move into the 1970s and the arrival of Ra's al Ghul. Crazy psychopath Joker comes back. You get less lighthearted Robin, and you get more of like the dark justice. If you ever watched The Flash this year, the Reverse Flash really railed on Batman as this version of, dark justice that he felt was really bad. It says a lot when the Reverse Flash thinks that you're too dark. But that's basically what Batman was during this Neil Adams era. Dark Avenger of the Night. The funny thing is that every 10 years, like new artists come along and say, I'm going to make Batman way darker than he's ever been before. Until you get to Frank Miller. I don't think anybody can go darker than Frank Miller. A really good Joker story from this era is called Joker's Five-Way Revenge. That's Batman number 251. There's Night of the Stalker. That's Batman number 439. And then of course there's the first big Ra's al Ghul arc, starting with Batman number 232. So moving into the 1980s, this decade obviously dominated by Frank Miller, both in The Dark Knight Returns and in Batman Year One. Two very different stories with very different artwork, but both some of the best Batman stories of all time. In fact, Dark Knight Returns was such a popular story that it spawned a sequel, Dark Knight Returns Part 2, and just now, in the last year, they've commissioned Frank Miller to do Dark Knight Returns Part 3, like literally, 2015, 2016. Dark Knight Returns as a story is intended to bookend everything that came before Crisis on Infinite Earths. Year One came after Infinite Crisis and was like a rebooting of the origin story. There's so many other great Batman stories from this era. You have Killing Joke, you have Arkham Asylum, Serious House on Serious Earth, A Death in the Family, obviously, big Robin story. So Frank Miller might be the most popular 80s Batman writer, but there are a lot of other great Batman stories. Moving into the 1990s was like my personal beginning with Batman, especially around the Nightfall era. What happened during this period is that, building on the success of the Tim Burton Batman films, and obviously, Frank Miller's big hits in the 1980s, DC wanted to do like a big, never gonna see it again type event. They wanted to break the Batman. You also have to remember this is the same era that they killed off Superman in. It's like, hey, let's do something really huge, some big event that's never gonna happen again. Which of course ended up not being true, because you get Batman R.I.P., you get a whole bunch of different stories. So even though Batman can never die, he gets killed an awful lot. So starting in like Batman number 491 and Detective Comics number 659, they started to spin out the Bane character. Like that was his debut in the comics. He was supposed to be like a really dark spin on the Doc Savage character, who was going to try and break the Batman in body and soul. Like the best anti-Batman you could think of. Just like Doomsday became the ultimate anti-Superman. So moving into the 2000s, we're entering like Jim Lee Batman era. One of the most famous Batman artists of all time and one of the most successful ones. He's been successful for a number of reasons, in addition to being a great artist. He obviously created the Wildstorm universe. But even though I'm not a big fan of Grant Morrison's R.I.P. Batman storyline, he did bring us Damian Wayne. He's the one that created the Damian Wayne character. Probably like the most popular version of Robin in the last 10 years. I will say, before he debuted, I completely lost interest in that character. There are a lot of different versions of Robin. Anyone wearing the suit, it just didn't register with me when I was a little kid. Damian Wayne came along and suddenly it was a lot more fun. Just like an asshole little kid, and Batman had to deal with him. After Jim Lee did that Hush storyline with Jeff Loeb though, he went on to do All-Star Batman with Frank Miller. So you have like one of the best writers with one of the best artists. I will say that like the new version of Batman, like this Gordon Mech wearing suit, is going to be a little bit weird, but I mean, we'll see how it goes. I'm always open to new things. So here's my big question for you guys. What's your favorite version of the Batman character, either in the video games or in the comic books? I know I mentioned the Square Enix Comic-Con exclusive Batman figure, like the really creepy looking mech Batman, but Jim Lee also designed another Comic-Con exclusive Batman. Very different look. It just depends on, which version of the character you prefer, and how fast you elbow your way into line. Seriously, you have not lived until you tried to get a Comic-Con exclusive toy. Those are some of the first things to go, like on preview night on Wednesdays. We're still a little ways out from Comic-Con. I'll have some special content for that. It'll be mostly like film, movies, and TV, but I will try to do a couple cool giveaways just like I did last year, so there might be like some fun toys to be had. I know it's been a little while since I've done a Gotham video, so I'll try to do a bonus video for that because there's a couple characters that they have announced, and a couple people like Two-Face, for instance, that have been bumped up to cast regular, so we're going to see Two-Face all of next season. That's actually a good idea for my next Gotham bonus video. I'll do a Two-Face video, so be sure to subscribe to get that. I'll try to post that next week. If you guys do have any other requests, just leave them in the comments below. I might be persuaded to give away a copy or two of Arkham Knight whenever that comes out in a couple weeks, but tomorrow I should be posting Flash and Arrow videos. I think, Flash Mirror Master at least, so look out for that. In the meantime, you guys can click here for my latest Suicide Squad video, and you can click here for my Flash Season 2 predictions. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Let's high five. I'll see you guys tomorrow.